Hey everyone, and welcome back to another roundup. We've got quite the episode today. So The Last of Us 2 seems to be tracking rather poorly by a few social media metrics. Then VG247, they really managed to do something fairly bad. I mean, it's such a stupid thing to do, and they're rightly being called out for it, so there's that to go through. Then we've got Geforce Now, we've got Steam streaming, and a whole bunch of other stories as well. Of course, though, as always, be sure to hit up our Patreon for the daily briefing, where you get all the news super quick, and then early access videos like our WB Games and Bethesda deep dives, and of course the big old stack of loot from our game studio. You got stuff like this, all of that, all good stuff, so that's there, really keeps us ticking, so thanks for that, and of course be sure to like, sub, all that good stuff, and with that said, let's get into the news. First up today, we've got some interesting Last of Us 2 trends that have emerged. So various social media metrics for the game are pointing to a surprisingly low amount of engagement for what should be a massively anticipated release. As an example, right, yesterday's The Last of Us 2 State of Play peaked at 98,000 concurrent viewers, while over 180,000 turned out for new details on Ghost of Tsushima last week. Now, this is by no means, right, a hard proof that The Last of Us 2 is going to underperform, but it does mean that it's not really tracking as well as some of the other big Sony exclusives have been, and that's not really a good look. Now, it could be that people are just deathly afraid of spoilers, and that with the release only being a few weeks away, have just opted to avoid social media entirely. There's then also, I think, that Sony have been going so hard on trailers lately that fans may already feel like they know too much, so why would they even tune in? While, of course, for Ghost of Tsushima, well, we didn't really know that much, so its showcase would have been a more inherently exciting thing. Of course, then, there is then just that many people will have seen the spoilers and will not really care about the game anymore. It's just hard to tell, though, what the balance is between people who have seen the spoilers and aren't that interested in the game versus just want to avoid spoilers in general, or didn't have as much of a reason to click on some of the new social content because, basically, it's The Last of Us 2. You kind of know what that game is going to be, as a video game in advance. It's not, it's basic survival going about the place, just like The Last of Us 1. Anyway, there's that. Now, there is also a little odd thing that happened where Eric Kane of Forbes, he tweeted his disappointment over not receiving a review copy of the game. That did spark the age-old argument over whether, giving free games to the media is a bonus or a necessity. So yeah, his Twitter's a bit of a minefield there, but it certainly is interesting, though, that Forbes did not receive an advance copy of the game, and they appear to be one of the only major outlets to have been missed out by Sony. Now, Kane did confirm that Sony did not give them a reason for overlooking the publication, and he has covered Sony games in the past with no issues, and he also didn't report on the leaks in any detail beyond acknowledging that they exist. But yeah, apparently Sony just have their reasons there. Seems a little bit weird, and that's basically The Last of Us 2 update for now. Next we've got a change of policy from Nvidia, where developers and publishers will now have to opt in for their games to be playable on the Geforce Now service. Now, this shift is presumably intended to address the many different licensing disputes that we've reported over the last few months. Nvidia basically took it as read, right, that if a dev or a publisher had participated in the beta test of that service, that then they would be okay for, just being in the full release of Geforce Now. But of course, as we know, that was not the case, and in recent months, the likes of Activision Blizzard and Bethesda have pulled their games from the service. Encouragingly, though, there's a bit of good news there, where Nvidia have reported that more than 200 publishers have committed to the service, which is a pretty strong response. Hopefully, it will build a bit more confidence in that library. But basically, any company who has not actively opted in with them by May 31st will have their games be automatically removed. Now, in terms of the impact this could have on the service, it's kind of hard to say. Opt-in could hurt the platform significantly there, but it should mean fewer abrupt removals. It is a bit sad though, previously the thing just worked unless a game was specifically blocked, so it was just the idea that with that service you could host your Steam library on another machine and play it whenever you're wherever you are. That's kind of less the thing now because it's opt-in. Then also, while many games have exited the service, it still is worth noting that it seems decently well supported, but it does look like, broadly speaking, the publishers did get their way, and really it still is worrying in terms of what game ownership means, okay? If you own a game in Steam, I do believe that that should mean that you should be able to run it on a virtual machine somewhere else and stream it to where you are, just in the same way you can run it on the hardware that you own. but, well, seems like that's not a particularly popular opinion with the publishers. Still, though, Geforce Now is not down and out, and there's a bit here with Steam that's kind of interesting. I think Geforce Now does have the potential to be a genuine competitor in the cloud gaming space, and I think a good one, right? Because its business model of being able to play whatever you already own, that is miles ahead of Google Stadia, so hopefully with their new policy being in there, it will steady the ship and people will have more confidence in it. Now, what's interesting is that Steam recently announced that Steam Cloud Play was entering beta, and that Geforce Now was the first service being connected. The partner's documentation also contains instructions on how developers can opt into the service as well. So, there you go. Maybe Steam's active involvement will help to legitimize this service a bit further, and if it does, I think that would be great, because the core idea of just having your Steam library and being able to run that on a virtual machine somewhere else and stream it to where you are, I think that is a very good thing indeed, and really, when I think about what owning a game is, I think it should include that. Next, a bit of console news, because rumor has it that Sony are planning a significant PS5 game reveal for June 3rd. Now, this info comes from Bloomberg, who reported that the event is tentatively planned for next week, so it could still shift a little bit. Now, the focus of it is said to be almost entirely the games, with Sony not expected to reveal every essential detail about the hardware in this sort of first event. Instead, Sony are planning to have further events over the next few months, and this pretty much just mimics Microsoft's strategy of maintaining a steady drip feed of announcements all the way up to launch day. Unlike Microsoft, though, Sony still have plenty to actually show us about their next-gen machine and what types of games we could actually expect on it. I think that would be a really good start. If there's anything of this current wave of console marketing, I think it's been that people are like, yeah, okay, that's the hardware, we get it, you're talking about your SSDs and your proprietary stuff, but, what about the games? And I think it could be that this event will actually be the start of us seeing what the bigger, more system seller-like titles are going to be, which certainly is interesting. And really, there's only so excited somebody can be over a controller or a logo, after all. And certainly I would not really advise being excited over just a logo, even though Sony's marketing seems to think that's something you should be excited by. Then next up, some potentially good news for Silent Hill fans, though maybe not for people who really liked PT, because it doesn't really seem like that's going to be back anytime soon. Basically, the Silent Hill series is making a surprise comeback in a bit of a strange way. So the longtime villain and the de facto face of the franchise, Pyramid Head, he's going to be appearing in Dead by Daylight. Silent Hill 3's protagonist will also make an appearance, as will a map based on Midwich Elementary School from the very first game. Now, this expansion is currently playable on the test servers, and it's going to go live for everybody in June. But what's more interesting here to me is that this is just some activity in that franchise. And it certainly is a series that's in a very strange spot these days. It's continued absence has long frustrated people. Konami, of course, got themselves in a lot of drama over how they handle things like PT and Kojima and all of that. And they've not really released anything official with the Silent Hill branding outside of a pachinko machine, so you might be wondering, why the hell now? Well, it's a bit weird because earlier this year we reported on a whole bunch of Silent Hill rumors, ranging from reboots to sequels to a return collaboration with Kojima, but Konami's continued, seemingly hatred of making games has kept the franchise in stasis, and that was essentially denied. Now, this partnership with Dead by Daylight, that does show that Konami are, at the very least, willing to do something with this intellectual property, so you've got to wonder, is this them trying to gauge interest in a full Silent Hill return, or do they have a full return planned, and this is just them trying to drum up a little bit more, just interest and relevance for that franchise? Alright, time for the drama of the day. VG247 are in some pretty hot water over a story they ran on Skyrim Grandma Shirley Curry. And honestly, it's a bit of a rubbish situation. So earlier this week, a headline read that Curry was stepping back from streaming, quote, for the sake of her health after receiving an onslaught of patronizing comments. Now, this headline, as Curry herself confirmed, is less than accurate. Now, while Curry is reworking her schedule for the sake of her health, she wrote in Twitter, quote, there was no onslaught of patronizing comments. The onslaught thing seems to be in a bit of a invention. She also stated that she wished that the VG247 article would just be deleted so that everything would go away, and I assume then that she would be, a bit more just left alone to do her thing without a drama happening. Now, the debacle has led to some pretty harsh critique of VG247 and of game journalists in general. I mean, I find it hard to have some sympathy there, to be honest. Now, this information, while not false, right, she did say these quotes. VG247 took her quotes and then spiced up this headline, really for the sake of marketing. Now, Curry mentioned that she had some annoying, patronizing comments, some sit-back-seat gaming on her stream, essentially, is what my read of it is. So, now that Curry's wishes are out in the open and everything is clear, hopefully this will simmer down and she can just look after her health and stream some Skyrim in peace. Now, it does reveal an interesting point about headlining, though. You see, here on YouTube, most channels, ours included, absolutely, I will own up to it, we've got to create these emotionally engaging titles, right, in order to get people to watch videos, and it's a sad fact of the platform, and I mean, I say get people to watch the videos, and you may think, well, hey, that doesn't control what I do. Sadly, actually, it's the sort of thing where even if that's not how you engage with YouTube, you won't actually see a video be recommended to you unless other people end up clicking on a title. It's a whole big thing. I'll have to talk about it someday, but trust me, when you get into the back-end analytics, it certainly does crush idealism, I'll put it that way. But what's wild to me with the headlining practices of some of these game blogs is that they essentially, they sometimes rip the truth to shreds in order to make a new narrative. Like, market this article as... and wait for it, angry gamers versus wholesome people. That kind of thing to get the clicks. And it probably did work, it probably did get the clicks, but it certainly was the wrong thing to do, as really the only victim of this, other than all of everybody's wasted time, was Shirley herself, who was needlessly thrown into a dramatic situation, and especially on the point of journalistic responsibility, after she said she was stepping away from her streaming schedule a little bit to look after her health. I think that is deeply irresponsible, and it's just indicative of the worst of headlining. So, there's that, and with that said, let's move on. Well, it looks like the idea from yesterday's video that GTA 6 will be releasing in 2023 was but a short-lived dream. So Take-Two have debunked the recent hint from their financial filings, confirming that basically the increased marketing spend in that quarter, that is what led everybody to think, or many people to think, that that's when the GTA 6 launch window would be, that was actually related to third-party marketing commitments, not an internal project. Now, the thing is that a similar bump up in marketing spend, that is actually what predicted Red Dead Redemption 2 before the game was even announced. So it seems right now, based on what they're saying, that is not the case for GTA 6. But of course, they could just be saying that, so it's sort of impossible to know right now. Certainly, if it was indicative of GTA 6, they wouldn't just say, oh yeah, that's Grand Theft Auto 6, but don't worry, we've not announced it yet. And then finally, I do have a nice little bit of news to leave you on. Denuvo DRM has been patched out of Metro Exodus, and Denuvo Anti-Cheat has been removed from Doom Eternal. And certainly, Denuvo stuff of any form going away from just about anything, I think, is worth celebrating as a bit of a victory. And there you have it, quite a set of stories for today's one, really. And it's funny with the VG247 one, I can see how that is a mistake that would be made naturally. But I think for, nobody to have thought about what they were insinuating there, I mean, it's weird. When you think about the narratives that usually end up coming from outlets like that, it kind of does seem like they saw an opening and willfully twisted it a little bit to their own ends to get that big title. And I mean, it's also weird because it's not even like that headline is that good of a representation of the core article itself. And this is also something I keep on seeing, where you have these really silly titles that sometimes are just totally bending the truth, or are taking, a tiny, a few lines of a paragraph, the only clickable thing, making that the headline, and then just the rest of the article is other stuff. I don't know, it's a crazy thing. I mean, it is an interesting part of digital media in general, certainly in YouTube. We have very different, different incentives and drives for how we do titles and thumbnails just for YouTube as a platform because of how it works. And yeah, it is a little bit different to how it works with, with just text, I suppose. But certainly I think that's an example of it all going wrong, right? And they should just retract and apologize for messing that up. So, God, well, what an interesting situation. Let me know what you think about that one. I really would be keen to know. But yeah, with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hope you found it informative, and I will see you next time.